Welcome, everyone. This session will be recorded. The breakout rooms will not be recorded. So, welcome to Leading International Collaborative Teams. Relationships matter in changing times. In these times of globalization and migration, we all interact with people who have various cultural backgrounds. With our increasingly digital world, we don't even need to go far anymore. Diversity and inclusion is a part of our daily life, no matter what profession we have. The intercultural agenda is becoming the world's agenda. CITAR Switzerland was founded in 2015. We are a diverse community of individuals and organizations, all sharing a strong interest in the intercultural field. We strive to raise intercultural awareness and take a stance on intercultural topics in our multicultural society. In a collaborative and inclusive spirit, we wish to provide a platform for intercultural dialogue and to serve as a point of reference. CITAR Switzerland is a member of CITAR Global Connect, which groups over 3,000 members into more than 30 national and regional CITAR associations spanning all continents. Our global outreach and membership numbers continue to expand, reflecting growing interest in the intercultural field and its added value in today's world. If you're interested in becoming a part of CITAR Switzerland, please do reach out to us. If you'd like to be a member of some other CITAR organization, do feel free, reach out to us again. We're happy to connect you. We are very much looking forward to this interactive session with you today. And welcome to Dr. Mary Jean Sedelli from University of Fraser Valley in British Columbia, Canada. Welcome to the CITAR Switzerland board and members of all CITAR organizations around the world, current and past presidents, all guests, and all representatives of the Canadian Swiss embassies, and the representatives of the Canadian Swiss and Swiss Canadian Chambers of Commerce. We are delighted you are here. Dr. Mary Jean Sedelli and I will be introducing ourselves over the next slides and as a part of the setting the scene. So we will now jump to the agenda. The next slide. While we're going over the agenda, please use the opportunity, and I see that some people are already doing that, that's wonderful. Please use the opportunity to share in the chat where you're joining us from today. Right, in the next 90 minutes, we'll have a brief look at some intercultural literature, share with you our research question and approach, and highlight putting international leadership into practice. There will also be some interactive tasks for you, and we're really excited about your input and sharing ours with you. Do make use of the chat. We might not see it right away, but others will, and everyone should please feel free to answer, comment, etc. I'd now like to hand over to my very dear friend and professional colleague, Dr. Mary Jean Sedelli, from whom I've learned very much from about duo-ethnographies and so much more, who will now introduce herself to you and set the scene. Mary, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Jelaine. Jelaine, working on this project with you has just been an absolute delight. So thank you so much. So to give you a little bit of a background history and tell you a little bit about my story, I have spent most of my life dreaming of the world and thinking about people I could meet and learn from and engage with. And so there was a time, however, I spent a lot of my time traveling as a tourist and doing things like that, but there was a time where it wasn't enough. I needed to go away and I needed to live in a society different from what I knew. I needed to experience all of the elements of being a participating member of society. Luckily, I'm a teacher. So that means that I'm able to do all of those things and take my degree and go where I want. So after about 10 years of teaching in high school in Canada, I went to live in Istanbul, Turkey. And I lived there for several years. And then I went to Hong Kong for several years. And then I needed to move on, and I went to Abu Dhabi in the United Arab Emirates, and eventually into Dubai in the United Arab Emirates. And along the way, I was able to bring my mother with me. So all of my journeys, my stories became part of her stories. And it was really wonderful to be able to do that. So one of the other really interesting things was all of the incredible people I met along the way. This is a picture of the team I worked with at Dubai Women's Colleges of the Higher Colleges of Technologies. Now, what's interesting to note is that most of the people I worked with, they had multiple nationalities. So they had passports from different countries because they had citizenship in different countries. There were over 42 languages represented amongst this group of educators, and a great deal of experiences. And our role was to create and deliver a curriculum that was empowering, that was leadership focused for the Emirati students in the United Arab Emirates. And it was incredible. Dubai at that time was an incredible place and space of cultural change, socioeconomic change. And I'm lucky enough that my PhD came from the research from that experience. But I also met some of the most incredible people in my life. And one of my dearest friends, and the picture's not coming up. It's being a little slow. There we go. One of my dearest friends, she and I worked together at Dubai Women's College, and this is her family. And we shared events together, and it was a real opportunity for bonding across cultures, and that was lovely. So today, I am the Associate Dean in the Faculty of Professional Studies at the University of the Fraser Valley. And part of my role involves the integration across disciplines of opportunities for diverse and empowering learning experiences. And part of that is to bridge this gap of recognition and valuing of multiple worldviews, diverse ideas, reciprocity of learning, and ultimately building lasting relationships globally among people who value global civic mindedness and who value cultural difference. And that is how I met Jelaine.
Thank you very much. Do I now have screen control? Let's see. Okay. Oh, I do. Wonderful. Okay. So thank you very much, Mary. The intercultural is an important part of my life, both privately and professionally. Volunteering at CETAR Switzerland on the board and as a mentor is a way that I can help newcomers to the field. So what does my pathway look like? Well, you can probably tell a little bit from the pictures there. I've been teaching intercultural communication and English for business to adults in Switzerland and internationally in both higher education and corporate settings for over 2 decades. This first slide here with the picture of Vancouver refers to my first experience with teaching when I was in Vancouver, where I grew up. While I was taking my initial teaching certificate, I was a volunteer tutor for college participants who needed to prepare for their academic studies in English. And there I had some intercultural and international encounters, which were really interesting. I then moved to Switzerland, freshly married to a Swiss man who had been offered his dream job. We'd agreed to try living in Switzerland for 3 years. That was like October 31st, 1989. So quite a while ago. I'm still here. And I consider Switzerland my home. There were some other things that cultural pathways along the way. For example, earning my master's degree from the University of Manchester in the UK. That was, and now you probably smile at this, that was really the only geographically close, by Canadian thinking, degree program of interest to me that I could access in English at that time. Now the whole education sector, higher education is different in Switzerland, but back then, that was the closest program I could take. So Crossing geographic borders to learn, live, and work has provided me with many opportunities to embody lived experiences interculturally. I have certainly made a number of pretty bad faux pas and pretty bad mistakes, but have turned these into learning experiences important for my own growth mindset. And yes, I've learned a lot. I'm still learning, never stops. Analyzing these experiences highlighted for me how theory and practice goes hand in hand to trigger deep cultural learning. So let's move on to these pictures here. There, okay. In addition to the Canadian and Swiss cultures, I've had the privilege to interact with many cultures over the years, thanks to my work at the Lucerne University of Applied Sciences and Arts as head of the exchange program, as lecturer in the taught and degree English program, and as co-head of the CAS International Leadership Program with Ingo Stolz at the Institute of Business and Regional Economics. It's with the latter that I have the opportunity and the honor of working together with Mary Jean Sidelli. Not only is there potential for the relationship built on trust to evolve and become a reciprocal friendship as it has, there's also an excellent scaffolding for our future cooperations, because relationships do matter. And I'd like to share a personal point with you, and that is there in the next picture. This is a picture of a wonderful friend of mine named Hope. She comes from Uganda. And this picture was taken at church one day. We go to the same church. So my son Travis, myself, and Hope, and many others. And Hope surprised me, or surprised us one day, with this picture that she had drawn by a friend of hers back in Uganda. And why was this special? Well, it was special because she had taken the time to organize it and had it sent over, and it was really meaningful. It was meaningful because of all the time that Hope and I had spent together, exchanging about our different cultures and helping each other, and it was really reciprocal. There's also another reason why this picture was so special, because it highlighted one of the probably most significant intercultural experiences that I've had recently, and that's in the next picture. This is at the wedding of my absolutely dear friends, Noch and Klaus. And they were actually both separately friends before I got to know them, and they got married. This is a wedding that my son and I were invited to in Thailand, and you'll notice his outfit is a bit special. That's because he was honored to being asked to be a groomsman. And so we were, me being his mom, were then included in the wedding party. And this was the most incredible experience for me, being part of a Thai wedding. It was absolutely beautiful. And being able to communicate and talk about cultural, how the cultural experiences are, that was really, really special. And it was from this event that Hope got a picture from Facebook and then had it drawn. And I was so surprised. It was really just absolutely lovely. And you'll see the last picture here is the Hochschule Luzern with the beautiful picture of Lucerne there. That's actually where I'm located right now. And then, oh, there is a last one, sorry. This one represents my work at CITAR Switzerland, my volunteer work. Actually, everything kind of connects in privately and work-wise. And this was from our Congress, done together with all of CITAR Switzerland. And this was a really special moment. It was thanks to Anne-Claude Lambelet that I was invited to be able to join into this group. And Tom Waterhouse is also part of the board here. And just being in that group together and all the preparation sessions we had, I learned a lot interculturally as well. So I think to wrap it up, I think that's a very good introduction. I think anybody who wants to know more, we can talk later, but I think you've got the scene is now being set. Right. So now on to a little bit of background intercultural literature. Mary and I have had many sessions online choosing which special point that we want to bring out for you. There's so much out there that we've chosen a few highlights for you, because culture is actually about making sense of things. And that's what we're trying to do here. So I'll be looking at the intercultural literature to start with, and then afterwards we're going to move on, and Mary will do some slides afterwards about our wonderful research project and draw things together for you. So culture is actually about how you make sense of things. And there are many theories and perceptions and views. And we've included a further reading and resource list at the end of this presentation, which will be made available to everyone. This particular slide, we started out with because the Globe 2020 research project is maybe something that not everyone's heard about. It's an extension of over 20 years of collaborative work conducted by the Globe research team. And in the 1990s, GLOBE, which stands for Global Leadership and Organizational Behavior Effectiveness, that project examined the relationships among societal culture, leadership, and organizational practices in collaboration with more than 200 researchers from 62 societies. GLOBE has become one of the largest and most comprehensive studies of its kind in the social sciences. And in this phase of GLOBE, it's called GLOBE 2020, the past 2 decades of findings are getting built on top of. And what did they do? Well, they expanded surveys so that now they've conducted surveys in more than 120 countries. GLOBE 2020 looks at to what extent cultures of the countries in the original GLOBE study have changed, and what major societal drivers the culture that drives cultural change. And 2 things that Mary and I were really excited about as we were going through all of this is 2 questions. What is the relationship between national culture and the antecedents of interpersonal trust in different countries? And how do leadership perceptions differ across genders and cultures? We won't be able to answer everything today, but we're certainly delving into some of these exciting topics. This one is probably familiar to some people. Hofstede's Insights country comparison tool is a fair bit easier to grasp than the GLOBE study. We've included it here, partially also because Hofstede, back in I think it was 1998, said managing multinationals means accepting national cultural differences and managing organizational culture differences. Here we can see a diagram. We chose 4 countries: Canada, Germany, Switzerland, and Thailand. It's my understanding that we actually have people from all those countries here and more. We chose 4. This knowledge isn't the total package. We're completely aware of that, but it can be helpful at the beginning when we're trying to make sense of some patterns. Yeah? For example, individualism and collectivism. This has to do with whether people's self-image is defined in terms more of I or we. So in Canada, you can see in individualism, that's the second part there, has a score of 80. It's a fairly individualistic society. This translates into a loosely knit society in which the expectation is that people actually looked after themselves and their immediate families. Similarly, in the business world, employees are expected to be quite self-reliant, and they're supposed to display initiative. Both German and French-speaking Switzerland score relatively high on this dimension, giving Switzerland a score of 68. And it is therefore also considered an individualistic society. We added Thailand as an example here as a more collectivist society where the we is definitely more on the focus. And if we have a look at the long-term orientation, that's the second one that we wanted to point out. This dimension describes how every society has to maintain some links with its own past while dealing with the challenges of the present and future. And societies prioritize these 2 existential goals differently. With a high score of 74, Swiss culture is actually fairly pragmatic. No surprises there, right? In societies with a pragmatic orientation, people usually believe that truth depends on very much on the situation, context, time, and they show an ability to adapt traditions easily to changed conditions. a strong propensity to save and invest, thriftiness, perseverance in achieving results. Canada scores 36 on this dimension. So there is a difference. It's very interesting when we start talking about this. Again, there's no complete solution to everything, and there are differences, but it does help to kind of understand some patterns. There's a strong concern with establishing the ultimate truth in Canada, and Canada exhibits great respect for traditions and a focus on maybe more achieving quicker results than maybe in Switzerland. The next one. There we go, did it. This one is based on Erin Meyer's country mapping tool. And she has a lot of great videos that we've put the links to for you that maybe afterwards you'd like to also reflect on. The country mapping tool is based on Erin Meyer's book called The Culture Map. And this tool allows you to click on whichever countries you're working with and receive a cultural mapping of the selected countries. Again, we chose the same 4. There are actually in this tool 8 culture map skills. In order not to have the slide completely looking busy, we chose 2. All 8 are the communicating, evaluation, leading, deciding, trusting, disagreeing, and scheduling. And in the whole, all of the scales that looks at how you build trust, give feedback, making decisions, etc. So for today, to share with you, we chose 2 that we found particularly exciting, and that is evaluating and scheduling. We plotted the same countries: Canada, Switzerland, Germany, Thailand. Why are these so exciting? Well, Mary and I actually experienced some of this as we were working together. First of all, my experience with the evaluating, giving direct and indirect feedback. When I first arrived and was teaching, I had some real problems because I was using something called the sandwich technique. And for those people who are not familiar with it, this is a way of giving feedback that is still quite common in Canada, you put in the negative feedback, but you surround it with so much positive, so many positive things and a little bit of negative in the middle. The big problem was that international people, and here in Switzerland as well, students, they left a feedback session with me thinking that they were just, that there was nothing that needed to be addressed, that there was no problem whatsoever. So that was a bit of an issue. And Mary and I were talking about that. Mary, would you like to maybe share what you shared with me about that? Definitely had to reflect.
It is very interesting. So Jelaine has the business background, and my background is actually education and teaching. And when we were talking about that, the most current research about giving feedback to students for about the past decade is that the sandwich approach doesn't actually work very well. And part of the reason it doesn't work very well is when you're framing something negative around so much positive, that negative piece has to be really, really operational in order for it to be recognized and capitalized on. Otherwise, it just seems like a lot of positive and maybe superfluous kind of. So pedagogically, in teacher education, we don't actually even teach that anymore, just because it's been shown to not work very well. And certainly it doesn't work well with a multicultural society. People have different orientations to feedback. So it just doesn't, as a blanket approach, it doesn't work well.
Unfortunately, it's still majorly in use everywhere.
It dominates higher education. It does.
Absolutely.
It dominates higher education in Canada.
Okay. Mary, would you like to say something about scheduling too? Because I think you had some laughs when we were working together as well.
Well, it's interesting because generally speaking, I'm quite time focused, but by Canadian standards, I'm quite time focused. But one of the things I discovered working with Jelaine is I'm not as time focused as I usually think that I am. So Jelaine will be the first to, okay, let's schedule our next 5 meetings. And let's make sure we've got the time very specific down to what time we're going to be meeting. And this is what we're going to do for the next 2 years, which had me kind of going, oh, wow, okay, wait a second. So in terms of scheduling, there was a communicative pattern that we had to sort out that took a little bit of time and energy, which was fun.
And it's interesting to think that we were actually born in the same country, right? So obviously there have been some changes that have occurred in the last years that I've been living in Switzerland. Right, thank you for sharing that. We also looked at, for example, the theoretical framework of the IDI, which is the intercultural development theory. Intercultural development inventory, IDI. We also looked at Broways and Price's 2019 way of identifying cultural values by plotting them on a cultural profile in the form of a web. Those sources you'll also see as further references at the end. Then, there we go. I love this slide. Being aware of cross-cultural communication differences and similarities is just the first step to removing barriers and making you a competent communicator across borders. One way I find really helpful to look at is through fruit, specifically peach and coconut. So how does this work? Well, first of all, you need to know that I had a bit of a shock coming from a more peach kind of culture in Canada to a more coconut kind of culture in the German-speaking part of Switzerland, at least where I live. I found less personal information was shared right at the beginning, and it took a lot longer to make local friends in a coconut culture. But when I made them, I have the kind that you have for life. So you can see there with the peach culture, I think Margaret Ertig Davidson, who wrote The Nubian Chocolate, she described it quite well when she said the outer layers of the peach and the coconut represent the public face of a person, and the inner layer represents their private life. So you can see how much are they willing to share. This one, I have to admit, is my latest favorite diagram. And yes, I'm one of those people who has favorite diagrams, favorite colors. This is my favorite diagram. You can find it in Dr. Joseph Schall's latest book in 2019, Language, Culture, and the Embodied Mind. It's also included in the references at the end. He also uses in his masterclass at the Japan Intercultural Institute and in his podcasts. Definitely check them out. So what does this mean? Well, there are two main uses of the developmental model of linguocultural learning, what you're looking at right now. The first one is introducing the 4 levels of the DMLL, Developmental Model of Linguocultural Learning, to course participants, to employees, I guess basically to anyone who wants to listen, right? And using the DMLL for structuring activities and pedagogy. The second ball that you'll see there, I'm going to call it a ball for lack of another word, is mapping. And that's where, for me, Hofstede's and Meyer's tool fit in. Their tools fit in there. That's where you're learning the rules. You can focus on structure. If you like to-do lists, that kind of gives you the mapping. You can figure things out. Systems is number 3, and that takes more integration and practice. You really have to start making connections there. Focus on meaning, gaining fluency. Stage 4 is much deeper, and this is when a person is really, hopefully, moving fluidly, maybe even between multiple cultures. And this is where I'd like to share with you something that happened to me yesterday, because it connects beautifully here. I received in the post, and I started reading Aminata Caro's newly published book that I ordered. It's titled Holding Space, A Storytelling Approach to Trampling Diversity. And it's already in the reference list. We updated it. If you're interested in a bridge between theory and practice in the area of inclusion through storytelling, you'll definitely want to read it. And I think Aminata might even be with us, or will be soon. She said she'd be arriving a bit late. So anybody who actually wants to talk to her, she'll be with us later today. Also, another book that I found really links up with this, this idea of mapping systems and the system of systems where you're making all those bridging connections, is Helen Spencer Odie's work on cultural and politeness. That was a real eye-opener. And both references are in at the end of the presentation. And now I'm going to turn over to Mary.
Okay. Up, we've moved a little bit beyond. So
there you go.
So we thought it might be good to have a task where we can kind of bring out some of your own lived experiences with respect to intercultural encounters. So we have what's called a Padlet. Now, I don't know if anybody's used a Padlet before, but it's a brainstorming tool. And when you click on this link or on the QR code, and I'm going to click on it now. Actually, I think Michael needs to stop the screen share and actually go to the site. This is what will come up. And in a few minutes, we're going to put you all in breakout groups. And what we'd like you to do is to have a discussion in your breakout group about your own lived intercultural encounters and what speaks to you, what comes out in terms of those discussions. And then one person, all they need to do is need to click on this little pink button here. And what will happen is it's like a Post-it note almost. A Post-it note will come up and then you can write in what your group talked about, some of the key points that you talked about, and you can share your ideas here. This Padlet becomes a living document that you can access at any time to see what people have to say. So we're going to give about 10 minutes for the breakout rooms. I'm just going to get rid of that Post-it note that I put up there. And then we're going to come back and we're going to talk about some of the concepts that you came out with in terms of your own lived intercultural encounters. So Michael, can you move everybody into a breakout room, please? So thank you very much for this. This is, as I said, a living document. And part of the reason we did this is because there's a lot of theory, there's a lot of literature, there's a lot of models, there's a lot of frameworks. But we are all involved in an intercultural experience right now. And just I really believe in the story of the intercultural experience and what that means in terms of context. So we wanted to get some of your reactions as well. And we've got some great comments here. We've got things like, you know, leadership in teams, and what does that mean when you're working across very different cultures, and the idea of feedback and face, very, very important consideration is face or shame. I learned that firsthand living in the Middle East, that it's a very important part to think about. Communication, how much you spell out versus how much might be intuitive, or reading between the lines. Hosting and hierarchy, punctuality, huge, huge, absolutely. But then there were some also really important points of discussion that were highlighted. So who is responsible for the outcome of an interaction? And that's a really, really important piece, especially with respect to this question of othering, as they sometimes say about interculturalizing. Homi Bhabha was one of the great speakers of othering in terms of cultural spaces. Always interesting to talk about something which is, you know, strange, this idea of what might be strange or unique or different. Internationalizing business, a comparison of two countries, and certainly some of those elements will come out a little bit later in when we talk about the research. Is there anything that anybody else would like to share that maybe didn't make it on this Padlet board? Kim, I think you had a few things you wanted to say.
Well, I'll be glad to write them once I can get on the pink pad. But I just wanted to say in room, I think we were room 3. Oh, there it is. But I'll say this first. We just also talked about problems with communication styles. Even one person is in a binational couple. So even with spouses, so that came up, that's very clear. Also the issue, this is part of communication, of feeling that another culture isn't sincere, because we have very different ideas of what This was actually Argentina, US, and it's very common, I think, for people to see US Americans as insincere. And then also an issue of hospitality and also how to interpret it. I mean, this can go, it sounds like it's not just food and things, but it's huge, and how you express and how you don't offend people and what hospitality means. Those were three things that came up. We didn't all speak, but those were big issues for us.
And those are really, really important. All of these concepts are really, really important. And they all fit within these models of interculturalism. But I also believe that that's where the storied approach to understanding interculturalism and the reflective approach to intercultural communication really is important. And so, Michael, I'm going to ask us to go back to the PowerPoint slides because we're going to move into the research piece, the research methodology. Thank you, Michael.
We actually had a hand up.
We did? Okay, so
that we didn't see. Antoine.
Yeah, I just, you asked if there was anything else.
Yes.
You know, I'm Swiss. I work with a Swiss company, teleworking, but I'm in Canada. I've been in Canada for a long time. A couple of things. I think that they're not fundamentally different societies, but that's where you really have to look at the subtleties. And I think, for example, the role of women, you can't say that in Switzerland, women are second-class citizens, et cetera. It's very subtle, but how we talk about diversity and inclusion in Canada and how I bring up issues of diversity and inclusion just being fresh from a large, sophisticated Canadian public agency and going into a Swiss company and seeing how diversity and inclusion is discussed and how the words can be all the same, but that the attitudes, the expectations, the speed, the codes, can be so vastly different. And I find it a really exciting experience. And I'm very lucky that my input has been really well received.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for that. And that is so true because we encountered that in the planning of this event as well. So that construct of gender itself came through in some of our research. So thank you so much for that. Is there any other hands up that wanted to share? We're going to move on. So that sets the stage for our research. We've talked about the theory. We've brought in some lived experiences that we've all had. So how Jelaine and I came together was with respect to the Vancouver International Leadership Week, which is an annual event, and it's a collaboration with Lucerne University of Applied Sciences and Arts, the School of Business, and the University of the Fraser Valley, the School of Business. So during this event, what happens is executive education students from Lucerne arrive in Vancouver to attend a series of planned events related to visits with government, industry, and academic engagements over the period of 1 week. So we are talking short duration, but a lot happens in that week. And the planning for this event is a collaboration between Jelaine and myself, mainly as co-leading the leadership team, the planning team. Now, this is interesting because as we were engaged in the planning of this event, at first, Jelaine and I did not know each other. So we met through somebody else that we both collaboratively know by the name of John Potts. And he's retired now, but he has been good friends with Jelaine for many years. And he met with me when I newly took on the role as Associate Dean. And how we came together in the planning of this is he said to Jelaine, you can trust Mary, she's going to be fine. And he said to me, you can trust Jelaine, it's going to be fine. So he built the trust between us as we started the planning of this particular event. And that leads to what ultimately became our research question, which is what can be learned about international co-leadership through an exploration over a 2-year time frame of collaborative co-leadership of the Vancouver International Leadership Week. So for the 2019, 2020, and 2021 years. So our purpose with this research was to consider how our relationship formed, how it evolved, And what has this meant for our continued partnership with our institutions and ultimately our learners? So Jelaine and I discovered early on that we both believe in reciprocity and appreciation of international learning experiences. We see them as mutually rewarding, institutionally, professionally, and personally. So that was really something interesting that came out right from the very beginning in our interactions. And ultimately with our research, what we wanted to do is we wanted to tell the story of this collaborative co-leadership. And so that led to our choice of methodology, which is a duo-ethnographic study. And what a duo-ethnographic study is, it's a new form of research, fairly new. It's been mainly used in education, although it's starting to transcend into other areas. And it's a systematic, reflective, collaborative form of research that is designed to get at the essence of the experience. And so the question then is, how do you do that with this type of methodology? Well, Jelaine and I had to make our stories explicit. And that meant our life history. To a certain degree, we shared some of that in the very beginning of this particular webinar. We had to speak very personally and intimately about the beliefs and the values that have guided our life histories. We had to make our stories explicit, but while we were constructing our stories, we also had to be open to deconstructing them and to critically questioning those conversations as we were engaged in both the storytelling of our lives and also the collaborative co-planning. So it's important to note that we didn't know each other, but that trust was implemented right at the very beginning because of our relationship with John Potts. So that meant right at the very beginning, we were able to engage in some rather intimate storytelling about our life histories, which led to a really interesting way of nuancing our collaborative co-leadership of this event. So what we did is we engaged in a lot of dialogues over the 3-year time frame. We engaged in a lot of critical questions of each other. We engaged in a lot of meaningful discussions about what things mean as we were going through the planning. And we shared a lot of that with the planning group. And ultimately, as a result of analyzing our data, we came up with 3 main findings of putting this international collaborative co-leadership into practice. And the first relates to aspirations, expectations through relationship building. So we were in an antitrust situation after John introduced Jelaine and I through email. We scheduled the first of many digital synchronous video chats. And it's important to note that we didn't have some of the more complicated discussions by email. We did it through video chats with each other. And that's when we discovered that, interestingly, we've both lived in different geographical contexts, and we've both had made a lot of faux pas, made a lot of mistakes, and learned from them. And we appreciate those mistakes, even though they might have been a little difficult at the time. So for example, we also had many situations. And I think one of the funniest examples was I shared the story of I was living in Dubai, and I had a student who was very appreciative of what was happening in the classroom. And so I came to the parking lot one day after my day was done, and my student said, "Look, Mary, this is a gift for you," which was delightful, except for one thing. The gift was a Lamborghini. Okay, so I'm in the Middle East, a country that values gift giving and graciousness and all of the wonderful things to show appreciation. I'm also an employee and a teacher, and it would just not be appropriate for me to accept a gift like that. So I was in one of those moments of, oh my goodness, what do I do? What do I do? And refusing a gift in that particular culture would have been, it would have been terrible. It would have been very insulting. So I actually had to go inside to my college and get my leadership to help me out with that one, because the family was quite powerful. So Jelaine shared her stories as well. And a lot of this happened before the co-planning. Jelaine spoke of the previous 8 years of this event, and I spoke about how I had reviewed the previous 2 years of the program, and I felt that there was a desire for a refresh in the program, and it needed a contemporary vision. So that's when we discussed and came together with the planning of it to integrate a sustainability, a culture, and a leadership piece woven throughout the Vancouver International Leadership Week. And from that, through our planning stage, that meant that there had to be a lot of very difficult conversations. And this is where honesty, openness, and leading as co-leaders of an international collaboration is really important. So with an event like this, there's a lot of meetings, there's a lot of people, and there's a lot of details. And Jelaine, all of these were shared with Jelaine regularly. We met about every 2 or 3 weeks. And Jelaine shared very openly and honestly some of the more difficult aspects and some of the aspects that might be nuanced differently with Swiss participants attending the event. So an example of this kind of discussion related to the inclusion of a Day of First Nations and what that could look like or should look like. Many people across the globe don't necessarily know about the genocide that happened in Canada with respect to First Nations people. And so we had to have some very difficult discussions about how to approach that and who to invite for that. But we also had different discussions about aspects of gender, aspects of the EDI, aspects of privilege and what that means. And what was really wonderful was Jelaine, none of these difficult discussions were avoided. They were addressed in a very direct way. Jelaine's feedback was shared. Jelaine has a very distinctive lens to bring to this as a Canadian, as a Swiss national. And she had very nuanced understandings about Swiss, German, and Canadian cultures. So that was really an opportunity to build on the strengths that she could bring to understanding the planning and the co-leadership of this event. And ultimately, the relationship continued. And the relationship continued for planning for 2020 and 2021. Clearly in 2020, we had a whole host of other things that came about with the pandemic. What would this mean for participants traveling across geographical boundaries? And that's when it also became more complicated conversations, because while we were open to doing whatever we could to make it happen, Canada had a quarantine on, there were travel restrictions, and we didn't know when or even if they would be lifted. As it turns out, for 2020, we had to cancel the event. And for 2021, we're shifting the event to an online forum just because we don't think that any of the travel restrictions will be lifted. But this planning could not have happened if it hadn't been for the relationship that had been built, from the sharing that Jelaine and I had with each other, and from the open and honest relationship that had been built. So key to this, from our reflections with each other over the past 3 years, is that relationships really matter. So putting this together as well in relation to leadership and collaborative co-leadership. There is great value in thinking about life histories and relational dynamics in collaborative leadership and trust. In our collaboration, we started with really sharing our life histories, which was intuitive rather than as an expressed agenda. We agree with Levin and Kurtzberg, who assert the importance of sustaining relationships while working virtually. They state keeping your own and your organization's ties positive and productive through periods of sustained virtual work will allow these valuable interpersonal networks to survive and even thrive. In our findings, we determined that there were 2 very important considerations. First, while email is a valuable tool, for our collaborative co-leadership, our interactions occurred via synchronous video chat, and that was crucial to allowing ourselves to be quite personal with our life histories and also dealing with difficult topics. And the second, building and maintaining trust in an interaction allows space for complicated and difficult conversations to occur. Reciprocal intercultural learning requires trust. So when crossing geographic, cultural borders, trust can enable an insider position in a foreign network. Trusting each other meant that Jelaine and Mary had this insider position in both of the university contexts. The effort we engaged contributed to the trust that we had for each other. And while the relationship may have begun as an antitrust situation through John Potts, it evolved to become a relationship of post-trust, professional trust, and absolute undying friendship that will be there forever, I believe. The trusting and collaborative relationship created the space for a level of honest and open dialogue that contributed to brainstorming, planning, and the feedback process, because we also sat down after the successful 2019 event and had a very engaged debriefing with Jelaine, with myself, and also with Professor Dr. Ingo Stoltz, who is also here. And that feedback was operational and it was integral to the success and the continued success of the program. I think it's also important to note that we treasured our planning sessions as opportunities for like-minded global leaders who also recognize that we don't know everything. So it was an opportunity for our professional learning, our intercultural learning to continue. And this is where there's the value of using a duo-ethnographic methodology to explore international and collaborative co-leadership. It's an opportunity for systematic chronicling of data. It's an opportunity for a systematic approach to data analysis. It's an opportunity for systematic reflection. And it's an opportunity to create a space for some different dialogues with respect to what is involved with intercultural and collaborative leadership and cultural competencies. So we're really happy that we did this. Eventually, along the ways, this has now become a situation where beyond the duo-ethnographic research methodology that we've done, we're also in a space where this has become a chapter in a new book that's coming out, which I'll talk about in a few moments. But our clear implications that have come through is that education for intercultural citizenship postulates that learners can, in addition to learning active citizenship in their own country, acquire the knowledge and skills necessary to act in a community which is multicultural, international, and comprises more than one set of cultural values, beliefs, and behaviors. And that quote is from Allred, Byam, and Fleming in 2006. It is because relationships matter that we specifically identify the importance of intercultural training for leadership. We agree with, and I know I'm going to not get this pronunciation right, so Jelaine, if I run into trouble, help me out here. Vuillemin, 2020, who stated that cultural training is an aspect of management training, not an extension of language training. And that's really important because Jelaine and I are both language educators who are also co-leaders. And we really believe that leadership needs to embrace and embody intercultural cultural training. Although understanding something about language and even speaking it is important in avoiding misunderstandings and communication breakdown, both Jelaine and I believe even more fervently in the need for global collaboration, global leadership, and embracing learning for cross-cultural competencies in order to be effective global citizens and global leaders. In today's interconnected world, relationships do indeed matter.
Wonderful. Thank you very much. And I agree completely with you about working together, and virtually it does work. It especially was a learning curve for me, and it was very exciting. And I'm so glad that we've got all these special things that we're working together on. So thank you very much. It's definitely mutual, Mary. So after being a part of this session, we would like to ask you, what do leadership and intercultural competencies mean to you? And we'd like to ask you to share your thoughts in the Menti poll. You have a choice of scanning, or I believe Michael, have you already put it into the chat? Yes, oh, look at that. He's so efficient. So you will see in the chat a link to the Menti poll. And I think we're doing fine with the timing. So if we could switch over to the Mentimeter. Look at that. Wonderful. Thank you, Michael. So now we should be able to see things coming in as people are writing. Oh, look at that. So we've got adaptability, inclusion, empathy, trust, awareness, humility. And the bigger the letters, the more times someone has written those in. Awareness, listening, relationships. So what do leadership and intercultural competencies mean to you? This is your chance. And we will clip this out and put it into the presentations that you will all receive then. Open-mindedness, multi-perspectivity. Oh, this is really rich. Lovely.
I love humility. Humility there. That's amazing.
Okay, so keep writing those in, and maybe at the end, maybe we'll have a chance to come back to that again afterwards and see what kind of rich summary we have. That would be wonderful. So keep at it. Wonderful. Thank you very much.
So I was asked if I'm still driving the Lambo.
Ah.
No. What happened was I drove it around the parking lot once. It's hard to drive. And the Emirati president of the college had a conversation with the father of the daughter who gave me the Lambo, and just explained the gratitude and appreciation. But no, I was not going to keep the Lamborghini, although my husband still comments on it and how I should have kept it.
I can totally understand that. Absolutely.
So there's one other thing that we wanted to share with you, and it's that final thought, the nuancing intercultural competencies, theories, and models. Jelaine and I believe that education has the power to be transformative. If innovation and interrelation of diverse cultural mindsets become the norm in teaching and learning. And that's a really important part, because it's easy to say, oh, it doesn't fit in my discipline, or I have too much other content to deal with. No, this needs to become the norm. It needs to become an expectation that we have of higher education. And ultimately, the reason is because relationships do matter. And I'm going to turn it over to Jelaine.
Wonderful, thank you. I'd like to add on to that, we've been interacting throughout the years through our universities, through friendship, also through CTAR Switzerland, and through the UNESCO Focus Group report. We've put a link there for you, which you'll receive afterwards and can actually click on to get it. We worked on the UNESCO Focus Group report, which was coordinated by CTAR Switzerland. And this was a really wonderful experience. And I see some familiar faces here of people who co-wrote it with us. It's wonderful. As Mary mentioned, we also wrote a book chapter together, and we got the information, I think it was yesterday, that it had definitely been accepted, and hopefully there'll be no more edits needed. And this book is, I have to admit, it's not Mary's first book chapter, but it's my first book chapter. I've written articles before, but never a book chapter. So this is like really special for me. It's in press, and it's co-leading an international collaborative team, Relationships Matter. And the editors are Ingo Stolz and Sylvia Oldenziel. And the book is called International Leadership, Affecting Success Across Borders in a Boundaryless World. And we are really excited, and we'll definitely let people know over LinkedIn when it's published. And I'm sure I'll be buying a few extra copies of this for my family. Right. There are some other things that we would like to share with you. And that is, if you could change the slide to the next one, Mary. Wonderful. So we've put together a couple of pages, and don't worry, I'm not going to bore you by going through all of the resources, but when you do get it, we've put in links for anything that you can access directly. These are the ones that are like our favorite go-tos for intercultural and for duo-ethnography and things like that, that we found really useful. You'll notice that the third book down, if you go back again, sorry, I was too quick. Third book down is Aminata Cairo, and I know that Aminata joined us, and I was really excited about that. Aminata Cairo's book, Holding Space. I bought 3 copies of it to give to friends as well. So I'm really looking forward to started reading it. Definitely reach out to her. She has LinkedIn and everything. And there you can see her picture. There's Aminata. Wonderful. Congratulations on your book. Really cool, Aminata.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you. Appreciate being here. And I appreciate your support.
Wonderful. Maybe you can put your LinkedIn to the chat so that everybody can link up with you, huh? Excellent. Yes. Fabulous.
You're asking me some technical skills here.
Excellent. Well, otherwise they've got the reference.
Yeah, I think I can figure it out.
Okay, that's cool. And then if we could go on to the second page there. Right. So we've got some other wonderful favorites here. For example, the Spencer Odie book, Intercultural Politeness, Managing Relations Across Cultures. That's also brand new, 2021. And there's some other really wonderful gems in there that we hope that you'll like. There's also our UNESCO Futures of Education focus group report from CITAR Switzerland with the direct link and the news item, and some other tidbits that we hope you enjoy. If you could go on to the next slide, unless there's something you wanted to highlight on those. Mary, we're good? Okay. All right. So I would like to take this opportunity to say many thanks to Dr. Mary Jean Sadelli for spending so much time preparing this with me. And a special thanks for working together on our joint week that we do and the Vancouver week, for working on the book chapter and teaching me all about duo-ethnography. There we go. I still can't say it, but I can write it. It's been just a joy working together with you. And proof that relationships do matter. They really do. And a special thanks to all the participants for being an active part of this session, and to the whole CITAR Switzerland board for making this session possible. And for all those people who have joined us around the world in different time zones. We had Singapore, South Africa, Thailand, Canada, everywhere. And yes, I just see in the chat something came up. Can we get a link to the resources? Yes, we will happily send you the presentation. And in there, all of the links are hot linked. And if you look in the chat, I think our contacts over LinkedIn, I think Michael just put those in as well. And that's the key topic there, to add in that we are very, very, very grateful to Michael from Missing Link, conference and technology experts, for enabling us to focus on the content. Michael, if you could show your screen there. Wonderful, there's Michael. He is the technology behind everything that it allowed us to concentrate on everything. So thank you so much, Michael. Please do consider connecting with Mary and myself over LinkedIn, and definitely check out CITAR Switzerland's website for future activities and sessions that we're offering. Think about our journal. We're very excited that the first issue of the Swiss Journal of Intercultural Education, Training and Research, it is definitely different now than it used to be. And we're even looking at getting an ISSN number. So we're very, very excited about that. So a big thanks to everyone. And I think now we can open up for any questions that people have. If you're off to get dinner, then go ahead. If you'd like to stay and chat with us, please do. We're very much looking forward to talking to you. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, everyone.